Stop what you are doing right now. The relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union is fracturing in ways that directly and immediately affect every migrant, every visa holder, every international student, and every family trying to build a life in Britain. Net migration to the UK is collapsing. Visa grants are down over 100,000 in a single year. A research team at the UK in a Changing Europe think tank projects that net migration could fall to between 70,000 and 170,000 in 2026, from a peak of 860,000 in 2023. Brexit removed 785,000 EU workers from the British economy, and the immigration system changes happening right now in 2026 could prove more seismic than Brexit itself. Your future in Britain is being shaped by forces bigger than your individual application, and if you do not understand those forces, you cannot protect yourself from them. The United Kingdom has always been at the center of one of the most consequential debates in modern political history, immigration. And in 2026, that debate is reaching a new level of intensity on two fronts simultaneously. Domestically, the UK government is implementing the most dramatic immigration restrictions in a generation, with changes that immigration specialists at Laura Devine Immigration have described as potentially more seismic than Brexit itself in terms of their impact on the immigration landscape. And internationally, the UK's relationship with the European Union, which has been tense since the 2016 referendum, is entering a new phase in which migration and border control are increasingly becoming bargaining chips in a broader geopolitical negotiation. Understanding both of these dimensions is essential for anyone who is currently in the UK on a visa, anyone who is planning to come to the UK, and anyone whose life and family situation depends on the stability of British immigration law. This video covers 7 critical things you need to understand about the intersection of UK-EU tensions and the future of your life in Britain. The first thing you need to understand is the sheer scale of the immigration collapse that is already underway in the UK. According to the UK in a Changing Europe think tank, net migration to the UK peaked at 860,000 in 2023. By 2024, it had halved to 431,000. Throughout 2025, it continued to fall, and the projection for 2026 is net migration of between 70,000 and 170,000, which would represent a fall of 80% from the 2023 peak in just 3 years. This collapse is not accidental. It is the direct result of a series of deliberate policy choices made by both the previous Conservative government and the current Labour administration. The salary threshold for skilled worker visas and family visas was raised in April 2024. In March 2024, care workers and senior care workers were banned from bringing dependents to the UK. The English language requirement for skilled worker visas was raised from B1 to B2 in January 2026. The skilled worker route was restricted to RQF level 6 and above, removing around 180 lower skilled occupations. The immigration skills charge paid by employers increased by 32% to $1,320 per person per year. And from April 2026, the salary compliance assessment for skilled workers is being tightened to require compliance within each individual pay period rather than on an annual basis. The combined effect of all of these changes is a visa system that is dramatically harder to access, dramatically more expensive to use, and dramatically less forgiving of any error or omission. And more changes are coming. The second point is about what Brexit actually did and did not do to migration, because understanding this is essential for understanding what is happening now. When the UK voted to leave the EU in 2016, the core promise of Vote Leave was that Britain would take back control of its borders. The end of free movement from the EU on 1st of January 2021 was supposed to reduce immigration significantly. What actually happened was the opposite. According to research by Professor Jonathan Portes of UK in a Changing Europe and John Springford of the Centre for European Reform, Brexit reduced the number of EU origin workers in the UK by approximately 785,000 by 2024 compared to what would have happened if the UK had stayed in the EU. But that fall in EU migration was more than offset by a dramatic rise in non-EU migration, driven primarily by the liberalization of work and study visas under the post-Brexit points-based system, which was designed to be open to talent from anywhere in the world. The result was the paradox that leaving the EU, which was sold as a way to reduce immigration, actually led to a period of record high net migration. The political backlash that followed this paradox is directly responsible for the wave of immigration restrictions that are now being implemented in 2026. In short, Brexit did not solve the immigration problem that its supporters promised it would solve. It changed the composition of immigration, shifting it from EU to non-EU origins, and ultimately triggered a political response that is now making life significantly harder for every migrant in Britain, regardless of where they come from. The third point is about the UK's deteriorating position in the global competition for talent and what this means for people who choose the UK over other destinations. The UK faces the same challenge as every other developed economy in Europe. Its population is aging. Demand for migrant labor is rising in healthcare, social care, technology, and construction. But political pressure to reduce immigration is simultaneously intensifying. As Professor Portes and his colleagues have noted, this dilemma is not unique to the UK. It is the central challenge facing all European governments. But the UK is managing this dilemma particularly poorly right now in a way that is creating specific risks for migrants who have already committed to the UK. The 10-year ILR rule that is proposed for most work visa holders is one example. Under the old system, a migrant who arrived in 2021 expected to settle permanently in 2026. Under the proposed system, that same migrant may now not be able to settle until 2031 or later. For a care worker in a medium-skilled role, the proposed 15-year qualifying period means they would not be eligible for permanent settlement until 2036. These are not hypothetical future scenarios. They are the likely reality for hundreds of thousands of people who are currently in the UK right now. And the government has confirmed that the changes will apply retrospectively to people already here. At the same time, Canada, Australia, Germany, and several other countries are actively competing to attract the same workers and students that the UK is making it harder to keep. The risk of investing years of your life in the UK immigration system, paying thousands of pounds in visa fees and surcharges, and then finding that the rules have changed against you, is now significantly higher than it has ever been. The fourth point covers the specific new enforcement powers that the UK has introduced and what they mean for migrants in practice. The Border Security, Asylum and Immigration Act, introduced in 2025, gives UK authorities counter-terrorism-style powers that can now be applied to immigration enforcement. This includes the ability to seize and examine migrants' phones. Immigration specialists and human rights organizations have raised serious concerns about the breadth of these powers and whether they are proportionate. The Statewatch monitoring organization has noted that the UK is using narratives around the instrumentalization of migration, framing irregular migration as a form of hybrid warfare or national security threat. This framing allows the government to introduce powers that would otherwise be considered excessive and that will have spillover effects for all migrants, not just those who entered irregularly. The Home Office revoked nearly 2,000 sponsor licenses in 2025, with common causes including missing right-to-work checks, late reporting, incorrect salaries, and job duties that did not match the standard occupational classification codes. Migrants whose employer loses a sponsor license are given 60 days to find a new sponsor or leave the UK. That 60-day window may sound adequate in theory, but in practice, finding a new licensed employer willing to sponsor a new certificate of sponsorship within 60 days is extremely difficult. Every sponsored migrant in the UK carries the risk that their immigration status could be disrupted not by anything they did wrong, but by compliance failures within their employer's HR department. The fifth point covers the opportunities that do still exist within the UK immigration system and why it is important not to lose sight of them even in the current environment. The Global Talent Visa, which provides the fastest route to settlement in the UK at just 3 years, has been expanded rather than restricted in 2026. A new design endorsement pathway was added from 8th April 2026, creating a formal route for outstanding designers and creative professionals. The High Potential Individual Visa, which allows recent graduates from top-ranked global universities to come to the UK without a job offer, remains in place. The Innovator Founder route has been made more accessible by allowing student visa holders to establish their own businesses while switching to this route. For migrants in highly skilled roles at RQF Level 6 and above on the skilled worker route, the general salary threshold has risen to $41,700, but the route itself remains open and functional. Partners and spouses of British citizens retain the 5-year route to settlement rather than the proposed 10 years. Holders of the British National Overseas Visa for Hong Kong also retain the 5-year route. The UK still has world-class universities, a globally recognized legal system, one of the largest economies in Europe, and a financial services sector that employs more foreign nationals than almost any other sector in the country. The UK is harder to get into and harder to stay in than it was 5 years ago, but for the right candidate in the right role at the right skill level, it remains one of the most powerful destinations in the world for building a career and a life. The sixth point covers the opportunity that exists right now in the window before the autumn 2026 changes to the ILR qualifying period take effect. Immigration law specialists across the UK have confirmed that the proposed doubling of the ILR qualifying period from 5 to 10 years is expected in autumn 2026, not April, as was initially feared. This delay is not an indefinite reprieve. The government has been unequivocal that the changes are coming and will be retrospective, but the delay means that migrants who are approaching 5 years of continuous lawful residence in the UK have more time than they thought to complete their qualifying period and apply for ILR under the existing rules. The ILR application fee is currently $2,885 for the main applicant. The process requires substantial documentation, including full immigration history, employment records, tax documents, accommodation evidence, and a life in the UK test. But the reward is a status that permanently removes all immigration conditions, grants the right to work for any employer without sponsorship, and opens the door to British citizenship after 1 further year. Anyone who is within 12 months of their ILR eligibility date should contact a regulated immigration solicitor this week. The autumn window is not guaranteed to remain open. The government has made clear that when the new rules arrive, they may come with very limited notice. The seventh and final point covers what every migrant in the UK should do right now, given everything covered in this video. The first action is to calculate your exact ILR eligibility date. Count from the date your first qualifying visa was valid. Check your absence record. Ensure you have not had any gaps in continuous lawful residence. The second action is to update your UKVI account if you have an e-visa. Every migrant with digital immigration status must ensure their current passport is linked to their online immigration record. The digital pre-departure check system that came into force on 25 February 2026 means that airlines will check your status before you board. If your new passport is not linked to your e-visa, you will be denied boarding. The third action is to speak to a regulated UK immigration solicitor before making any immigration application. Given the pace of change in the rules, generic advice from social media, community groups, or unregulated advisors is not adequate. The fourth action is to review your salary compliance if you are on a skilled worker visa, particularly if your pay includes variable elements. The new pay period assessment rules in force from 8 April 2026 mean that salary compliance is now checked within each individual pay period. The fifth action is to stay informed. The pace of change in UK immigration law right now is faster than at any point since the introduction of the points-based system in 2008. New statements of changes to the immigration rules are being published regularly. Parliamentary debates, court challenges, and Home Office announcements are happening on a weekly basis. The Skill Migrants Alliance legal challenge against the retrospective ILR changes is still developing. The Westminster Hall debate of 17th of March 2026 generated further parliamentary pressure. The situation is evolving, and the information you have today may not be sufficient for the decision you need to make next month. The UK in 2026 is not the immigration destination it was in 2022 or even in 2024. The rules are harder, the costs are higher, the qualifying periods are longer, the enforcement is stricter, and the political environment is more hostile to immigration than at any point in a generation. Brexit changed the composition of who comes to the UK. The current government is changing the terms on which anyone can stay, and the tension between the UK and the EU over migration, border control, and asylum cooperation adds a further layer of uncertainty that affects anyone whose life and plans connect the two sides of the channel. None of this means the UK is no longer worth fighting for. It means that the fight requires better information, better planning, and better professional advice than ever before. Share this video with every person in your network who is in the UK on a visa or who is planning to come. The information in this video could save them years of uncertainty and thousands of pounds of avoidable mistakes. Leave your questions in the comments below. Subscribe to this channel for every update as the immigration rules continue to evolve through 2026 and beyond. Your future in Britain is worth protecting. Start protecting it today.